You heard earlier about the fact that across the industry, incidents repeat, and we don't do enough to share amongst ourselves openly and honestly about where we fall short. And we need to do more of that if we're ever going to get to a place where we can eliminate fatalities right across the industry. This is a photo of Daniel Springer. It was taken with his son Wolf when Wolf was 11 months old. On the 6th of August in 2017, surrounded by family in the Townsville Hospital, Daniel passed away due to injuries sustained at an incident that occurred at the Goonyella Riverside mine on the 5th of August 2017. A couple of weeks ago, we commemorated the 1-year anniversary of his passing. As an organisation, we remain deeply, deeply committed to understanding exactly what happened, ensuring that we share that with everyone so that this incident in particular will never happen again. A couple of years ago, BHP took the step of removing legal privilege from our fatality investigations. That was a very deliberate step we took so that we could share openly and honestly our findings, not only with our own teams right across the globe, but also the people we work with, our contractors, our partners, and everyone else in industry. And it's in the spirit of that that I'm proud to be here today to share with you, valuable members of our industry, as to what we learnt when we investigated this tragic event. Daniel was a boilermaker. He was working on the platform you can see in that diagram, cutting steel plate away from the back of the bucket. It was liner plate that was put there to protect the bucket. During the process of cutting away the steel plate, it sprung up unexpectedly and struck him on the head, causing the fatal injuries. We learnt from subsequent investigations by the inspectorate that this plate moved up to 120 centimetres, very quickly and with great force. Why did it move? There was stored energy in the plate. And there's a number of people in this room that have been in the industry a long time, and you are well aware that stored energy is one of our most insidious hazards. You can't see it. It exists in compressed gases in cylinders, fluids under high pressure, electricity in batteries. But in this instance, it existed in the form of stored energy inside a steel plate. The photos you're seeing there are of the bucket in question. To your left, before the incident occurred, the two large steel liner plates that were on the back of the bucket, over 2 metres wide and 20 mil thick. I draw your attention to the state of the liners. Worn, dented, cracked. And it was because of that state that planned work was being undertaken to remove the liners and replace them. The picture to the right shows the work that Daniel was doing when the incident occurred. You can see just to the left of that right-hand photo where he had already cut away sections of the liner plate. And then he was making a lateral cut across to the centre of the bucket. And we believe it was at the point at which that lateral cut was finished that the plate sprung up and struck him. Now, what was unusual about this event was the force and how much the plate moved. Directly following the incident, we undertook an investigation, internal inside the company, to understand what happened, what went on. We use a methodology called ICAM. We brought in an external facilitator and we pulled in experts from around the globe. The methodology adopts a philosophy of no blame. No blame at the front, the centre of where the accident occurred, but it steps back and it looks into What were the systems breaches? What were the process problems? What was the cultural issues? What were the leadership challenges? And it looks upstream of the event to say, what could we have done further upstream to prevent the environment occurring that allowed this incident to happen? We found a number of things that we can learn from, and we'll share those with you. But at the core of it, the key piece that was found was that the hazard was not identified before the work was taking place. In the fullness of the investigations, we come to learn that this hazard on the scale was relatively unknown in the industry. There's no reference to it in any of the standards on cutting and welding. None of the panel of experts had seen it happen before. And until we found a couple of specialised metal fabrication firms that were aware of the hazard before we found someone who could talk about it. So at the base of this, with the hazard not being identified, no controls were put in place. And as such, Daniel was at risk. So, how did the store energy get into the liner on the back of the bucket? The mines department took the bucket and the plate and gave it to an external expert to get to the bottom of this. How did this stored energy get in there? They did an excellent investigation. And there's a summary of which is Safety Bulletin 172 on the Inspectorate website, which summarises the findings. And if you haven't already, I encourage you to go online and have a read. This is important for all of us in the industry. It states three main causes of what drove the stored energy into the bucket. Into that plate steel on the back, the impact, the index of normal working life created small point loads that created stored energy. Plastic deformation of the steel plate itself, again in the normal working life of the bucket, added further stored energy. And build-up of dirt between the bucket and the plate itself added further stored energy. And so by the time I got back into the workshop ready for Daniel to cut, it was all pent up, ready to release. The investigation outlines some other causes of stored energy that you might find in steel plate. And also very helpfully, it outlines some of the things you can look for when you're looking at a steel plate attached to infrastructure to try and determine whether or not you're going to find stored energy in it. It outlines that the larger the piece of steel, the greater the chance of big springback with the stored energy. Immediately following the incident, first and foremost, we had to ensure that Daniel's family was looked after. And we've had contact with Carmela, his wife, ever since. We paid host to her and a couple of Daniel's close friends on the anniversary of Daniel's death. The Miners' Promise Fund was set up, and for every dollar that was raised, both inside the company, across the globe, and from the public, we matched it. Now, none of that can bring Daniel back, but it's important to look after family. Outside of that, immediately we had to stop any cutting of curved steel plate on any of our infrastructure. Now that we were aware of the hazard, where else was it? And we stopped that until we could undertake risk assessments to ensure that it could be done safely. And then we undertook the investigation and have since been sharing the findings through the QRC, through various forums, with mail-outs to contractors and with me here today. We took a number of steps following the investigation. Some gaps we found were central and some gaps we found were peripheral but still important. It's a no-brainer we've ceased the use of large liner plates. The smaller the liner plate, the smaller the chance of springback. We reviewed our hot work procedures and our risk assessments. There were a number of risk assessments that were carried out prior to Daniel underdoing his work going back years, and none of them identified this hazard. We introduced mandatory management of change triggers. At any time something was changed, we would go through the management of change. We think that's important. Some peripheral things we found, the SOPs across our sites were varied. Some were much better than others. So we've commenced work to try and standardise them to make all of our workplaces safer. Here's an important one. We introduced the concept of chronic unease. The simple fact of the matter, and in our industry, right across the globe, there are hazards that exist that are hard to spot. Some of them are literally invisible. And what we've introduced with all of our teams across BMA is this concept. These hazards exist in all of our workplaces. We're not perfect, but they have infinite patience, and they will wait forever for you to trigger them. And if we don't get to them and deal with them, eventually they will get to us. So we ask our people, even when it looks good, even when everything looks like it's under control, what could go wrong? We've encouraged all of our teams to get on the front foot and find these things before they find us. And I'm pleased to say, having done that work over the last 9 months, we've had 1,000% increase in the amount of hazards that are being reported and being dealt with that could have otherwise turned into high potential incidents and fatalities. Contractor management. Across the globe, BHP has thousands of contractors every day coming on and off sites. And we need to make sure that every time any one of those people steps onto a site, that they're very clear on, 1, the big risks that can kill them, 2, the scope of work that they're there to undertake, and 3, who is the line leader who can help them do their job safely each and every time. All the way through to creating design technical specifications for our buckets, each with a unique identifier so that we can track from cradle to the grave each bucket across all of our sites. But there's more to do yet. Now that we've understood the findings from the investigation into how the stored energy came to be, we need to work with the various stakeholders to make sure that hazard gets called out in the standards we have across Australia for cutting and welding, because it was silent on them before. And I think in your talk earlier, you talked to the fact knowledge-based mistakes, right? When we have a gap. It's not a gap anymore. We know about it and we need to fix it. I'll come back. The pain and suffering that Carmela and Carmela's family feel as a result of the loss of Daniel is immeasurable and cannot be undone. But what we can do is learn. And what we can do is take every step we can to ensure it doesn't happen again. And the simple fact of the matter is, none of our sites are perfect, and there are hazards out there waiting to get us. We need to get on the front foot. Chronic unease, what else could go wrong, and get to them before they get to us. As an industry, we need to do a better job of this. Because if the job can't be done safely, then it shouldn't be done at all. Thank you.